We still right. And I know, well, I was like, you would still be the
Let's pray and send you back.
Board of Mark graphics, that's cheap. Pulling out all the stops.
I've looked at it somewhat today, huh? Yeah. Okay, this is the February, today was the 7th. Hey, wow. Work session of City Council. Ms. Walker, do you want to bring invocation, please?
Sure we can. Shall we pray? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the wonderful warm weekend we had, which is a preset to the falling of spring. We thank you for our great city and all of our employees who work so hard in making it the city that it is. We also give thanks to our first responders who at times place themselves in harm's way so that we can live in a community that is safe. We also always give thanks to the men and women of the armed forces and their families who sacrifice a lot for us to live in a country of freedom and democracy. We also pray for your guidance for this council and for our mayor and for all the leaders of our country, statewide and our president. And we pray that we will always keep service above self and that we will do the things that are in the best interest of our community, of our state, and of our country. These things we ask in our blessed name. Amen.
Amen.
Join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Pope, come on down. Talk about events.
I think you all had the proposed changes to the alcohol policy for downtown events in your all's packets and information. Hopefully it was straightforward and easy to understand, but I thought I would tell you all how we arrived at this moment, why we're before you all again. But the administration has been working with the different groups that organize downtown events, specifically our event with Cruise In that is city sponsored, but also with the Heritage Council on the Blues, Bikes, and Barbecue Festival that's coming up in May. And as we have told you all in the past couple of years when we've been before you and talking about the policy, that It's somewhat of a changing effort as we go through events each year and understand how things work a little bit better and working with the crowd. So it's been the effort from, I guess, led by Sarah, who coordinates things for the city, but then working closely with the police department on how to handle this properly. And like I said, over the last couple of years and the number of events, I think we have learned some things. I think we do some things differently today than we did a couple of years ago, and I hope you all would agree that the improvements, the little bit that we've done administratively, have made improvements and things work well. We haven't had any issues, so that's been good that we can report that to you all each time, and each time the festivals have been very successful. But now we would like to look at another issue to deal with, and that is how the containers that people actually walk around with downtown that have beer in them is what we're really talking about. Specifically for BBB, there will be a distilled spirits garden again proposed for this year, but it will be in the Brown Pusey Garden. It will be held in that area. That seemed to work very well last year. I think the festival organizers, the Heritage Council, and the city got some very positive comments about that setting. So I think we're going to try to take advantage of that and keep that setting. But in the interest of being, I guess, more environmentally aware, the discussion at the committee level has been if we use aluminum bottles, we can have the opportunity to recycle. We can reduce the waste that we create at these festivals. And I think the guys down in customer service and the guys at Parks and Rec will tell you that anything you can do to reduce the amount of trash, they would very much appreciate, because they're the ones who pick it up and haul it off and do all that. So the proposed change to the policy, again, just allows some flexibility so that if the decision is made to use aluminum bottles, that we can do that. So we're not talking about anything that's going to break or cause problems for us. I think we will still, in both of the events and other events downtown, still look at using disposable cups too. But I mean, we, like I said, would like the flexibility to broaden the policy just a little bit, just to say that it's non-breakable or no glass bottles. And that saves us from having to come back to the council every time somebody says, well, this time we want to use aluminum bottles. Well, this time we're using cups this time. So if we just have that general policy, again, things are still going to be defined within the designated area. We're not talking about changing boundaries or doing all that. But we do think, like I said, it gives us the ability to potentially would reduce the waste stream. And again, I think we'll probably walk before we run on some of this. I don't know that how broad some of the changes will be, but I mean, we've talked about going strictly to this if it's okay with the council, and then we've talked about using a mix of cups and aluminum bottles too. So like I said, that's still in the works, but again, this saves us from having to as a group and working with the local organizations to kind of come back to you all on every little event and everything if we write the policy this way. So I'll answer any questions, but the policy has been adopted by a vote. So we would place that on the agenda for next Tuesday's regular council meeting and ask that you all just amend the policy as we're proposing. So
yeah, the only question I would have is that obviously there's going to be a cost factor involved. If you go to cans, you're going to go away from the draft beer, and canned beer is going to be more expensive than the draft. I mean, everybody's taking that in consideration.
In all the committee meetings we've had so far, Terry, yeah, I mean, that cost, I think, will play into all the factors. I mean, like you said, There's some benefits to each way of doing things. There's some benefits to look at the cost and control it a little bit more in a container instead of what you're spilling or what you're not doing that way. There's also additional cost on ice and how you transport things around. So like I said, the discussions at this point have been, we need to look at all those factors. And I think, yes, the organizations doing it will make some decisions, like you said, based on, I mean, some of it will be economic decision, but some of the decision too has been around, like I said, the recycling aspect and being environmentally conscious of things and doing that. And that's also being looked at as, well, if we do some recycling, that might be an income stream to recover some of those costs if we recycle a number of the bottles and cans too. So like I said, you're right. I mean, some of it will come down to an economic decision, but at this point, like I said, in working with everybody, it's felt that if we had some flexibility to make those decisions, then we wouldn't have to, like I said, come to you all and say, okay, this time we're using bottles, or, oh, bottles didn't work this time, so we're going back to cups or doing this. That it might, like I said, just as long as everybody understood it would be in containers, no glass, so nothing that's going to break. And again, still within that designated area. So we're not talking about expanding outside areas that you all have already approved and stuff. So,
The only other thing I thought of too was that it could encourage some people to bring their own, because you can't distinguish if somebody's if they're drinking the same kind of beer that we're selling, then some people could do that.
it could, and I'll,
That's just a decision you all, I mean.
and that's been discussed, and you're right. I mean, some of that's, I mean, there will still go through the banding process and purchasing tickets. So, I mean, there's going to be some effort to say, oh, wait a minute, if you're walking around with something, you should be banded and you should be identifiable that way. So, but you're right. I mean, those are all things that I think as organizers, we're going to continue to work with the local groups that do that and try to make those kind of
Well,
decisions.
and I think regardless of what, I agree with what Terry said. I think regardless of what we do, people are still gonna find a way to beat the system, whatever you do. I like this simply because of doing away with the glass. I think that's a safety issue, but yeah, I agree with Terry on that other. We're gonna find ways they're gonna find ways to beat the system.
They always seem to.
Yeah, we're.
Are you on that committee?
Speaking from experience.
Yeah.
Not every time.
So, we know who to target now in May. So if you get followed around, Ron, you'll understand why.
But the giveaway.
The drone's not shooting video, it's watching you.
Jerry, I agree totally with you.
Okay, like I said, we'll put it on the agenda for next Tuesday. In the meantime, if you all have any questions, just give me a shout. Thanks.
Yes, it's fast approaching. Memorial Day weekend will be here soon, so.
We're excited.
Yes, absolutely. The Parks and Recreation Department's had an opportunity to kind of sit down, research, look through policies, pricing, a lot of various things that you all have in your packet tonight. What we've done is done a lot of research with other facilities. We've done some cost comparisons with other facilities. And what you all have before you is a draft of what we put together on all of that. I'll be happy to kind of hit the highlights on it and discuss those. And then as we go through this, if you have any questions, I'll answer those as best I can. Basically, what we're proposing as far as hours of operation is 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Sundays. We're looking at opening up this Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, and then the final day of the pool being Labor Day. And with this, we'll run in conjunction with Elizabethtown Independent Schools. And basically, if school is in session during the week, the pool will not be open. Say if after Memorial Day, there's still weeks of school, we'll open on the weekends only and have those weekend hours. It's what we've done in the past. It's what's made the most sense. People simply don't come out when you only have a small window of time open on the weekdays. So that's what we're looking at there. there's several, I guess, policies and rules and different things that without going through those individually, did you all have any questions on any one of those that I might be able to answer? And that is, basic standard pool rules, what you would find in any aquatic facility, anywhere, pretty much. The next item that we have is private rentals. We've done this quite a bit in the past at our old facility. We had several pool parties and different things like that. And one of the things that we're talking about is Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, as well as Sundays, have the availability to rent the facility after the hours of the pool. And so there's a 2-hour window in there, and people have the option where they could just come out and rent the pool deck only, or they could rent the whole facility, and that being, the lazy river, the pool, the party room, and all of those types of things. The proposed costs that we have and what we did is we basically took a look at what it takes staff-wise to be able to do a party. And if you look at the pool deck right now, there's a minimum, and this is a minimum, and we'll go through and address this as we go through it, of 8 lifeguards that have to be at the facility at one time, because you have lifeguards for like the slides, the deep end, the shallow ends, the lazy river, those types of things. So when you factor in the cost of what it actually takes us to run that for that time period, that's how we came up with those costs. The cost being for the pool deck only $200, and then for a private party where you had access to the whole pool was $500. That also takes into account the prep time that it takes to open the pool, and then everything that you have to do to close it down and clean up the facility at the end of the night. We have a state-of-the-art facility that we're looking at providing. And I think those are very competitive rates.
Seth, do you think you're gonna be able to find the 8? I think it's more than 8. but if you got
It
8
takes,
lifeguards,
it takes more than 8. We actually put out advertisement last week for the positions, and I've been encouraged by what I've seen coming through. We have honestly had between 6 and 8 that have come through within the first week that look like really solid candidates, with others that have taken applications interested. I think we need to be competitive on what we pay our lifeguards because there are several pools and stuff in the area. So we've taken a look at that to try to be as competitive as possible. And I think the draw of a new facility with what we've got is going to attract people as well. So I feel very good with what I've seen so far, and it's still early. I think the weather breaks, people kind of get spring fever, and then, once they see the slides go up at the pool, that's going to generate a lot of excitement because that's something really visible people will be able to see. So I think we'll snowball off that as we go.
You could get Ron certified as well.
Hey, there you go.
He could go. up
People
there.
will still find a way to.
Exactly. The next thing I'll go over is the proposed rates that we have. And what you all also had in your packet was a comparison study that we did with other facilities around the area. So we tried to be as competitive as we could with the other rates that we came across, but still be affordable and accessible for everybody in the community. We have a proposed family pass rate of $200. And what that does is that includes up to 6 members on that pass. We capped it at 8 members, so each additional member after the 6 is $25 each, which would go up to a total of $250. Or a single pass for adults 18 and up is $90, or a youth pass 4 to 17 is $80 for the season.
That's a deal.
And I think it is a deal, and I think it's very competitive too with what rates we were seeing. The daily admission rates that we put and proposed to you all was 3 and under are free. Youth 4 to 17 would be $4. After 4 p.m., from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., that would go down to $2. Adults, that's 18 and up, is $6. And then after 4 p.m., it's $4 to 6 p.m. We also wanted to provide some other opportunities. So we proposed that Mondays after 4 p.m. in June and July for all ages, it would be $2 for the twilight hours of 4 PM to 6 PM. And
When city council's over, we can all rush down.
Right.
Exactly.
You
exactly.
read the whole thing for us, though, won't you, man?
And one
Jeff?
thing,
How do the daily admission rates compare with what we have been charging?
I think at the old pool, we did it into 2 different sessions. So we basically had like a 4-hour block or 3.5-hour block. We closed down for a half hour, I think it was, for a break. And then we opened up again, and each one of those sessions was $2. Again, remember, with the facility versus the facility that we have now with the Lazy River and different things, we've taken that, but
And
that
I
was
agree.
$2. Another thing I think that it's important to note is we do have a free option with our spray ground. And that's something that we haven't had in the past. So people can still access that and not have to pay a fee to do that. Let's see. We've gone over the proposed hours and pricing. We are looking at swimming lessons as well, and we're working through the details. But what we're looking at doing is some morning sessions and some evening sessions. And the reason that we left a couple days of the week open so we didn't have private rentals was so we could do swimming lessons if it filled up that much. Let's see, the last thing I'll talk about is one of the new features too is we do have a party room. So people have the accessibility to rent the room, have birthday parties for a block of time. And that's a 2-hour block of time. And then they would have access to the pool and the party room and those things. And the proposed rates on that, we proposed the Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. block of time and a 1:30 to 3:30 block of time. And that's $125, and that's up to 35 people that would have access for that.
Say that again now, how much?
125. 2-hour block of time, 35 people.
The 2-hour block is just for the room, they can still swim.
They can still swim, yes. So if they have that and they're at the pool that day, they have, of course, they can go longer than that 2 hours if they're already in the facility. And then the 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. block of time, Monday through Saturday, because there's a smaller window, they don't have as much time to swim, it's $100. Sunday, there's a 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. block for $125, and then a 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. block for $100 as well. So that's kind of the highlights in the packet. Are there any questions that I can?
Jeff, the party room fees, that doesn't include the pool, right?
It does.
It does include the
Yes.
pool.
For that length of time.
For that length.
For that, okay.
That's right. And then if they wanted to stay after the party to swim.
They can still do that. They would have that availability to do that.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Because it's included in the price of the party room, the
Right.
swimming even afterwards.
You know, I was pleased with every bit of it on all your proposals. And I think it's the way that you've got laid out and everything. I think it's great. I think it's competitive. I think it's fair. I only had one idea that I thought I'd just run past you. At the end of school, I wondered if there would be a benefit to talk with the people that do the backpack programs and maybe put in some free passes to the kids that are on the backpack program. I don't know how many, but a few. I mean, obviously, if you're having a tough time affording lunch, you'll still have a tough time if you've got 3 or 4 or 5 kids with the $4 passes. So I just wondered if that was anything that anybody'd be interested in. And it doesn't have to be a lot of passes, but just, if nothing else, a note or something from the city that enjoyed, the summer, and here are some passes for the ones in the backpack. And I don't even know how many that would be, but
Right.
maybe it's something we could look into.
Wouldn't we also, though, Terry, have to get into verification of?
I think we'd use their verification, so we wouldn't even, we wouldn't even necessarily know who the families or the kids were. Because don't they have some protocols that they have to go through for the backpack
Who
program?
qualifies to get
To
back?
qualify
Yeah.
for it?
They do.
The school lunch program, you know what I'm talking about.
Right. We would have to look into it. The one thing important I think to remember is with seasonal staff and trying to keep all the information that in line and all the checks and balances, we just have to find a way if we did do something like that where it's consistent with our staff. It's hard for them to be able to keep all that information in order, I guess. So it's something that we could definitely look into and see if it's a
Yeah,
possibility
I guess
what
what I was
works.
thinking of is, here's a coupon for one visit.
Okay.
And when you come, you hand them the coupon and that visit's over,
Gotcha.
and I don't think it'd have to be a lot, but, maybe it's a half a dozen or, something like that. Just an idea.
Okay.
That it?
Looks good.
Thank you.
Hey, you're very welcome.
Thomas, how much was it to get in the pool when it opened in the early 60s?
10 cents, I think. Most time you can sneak in.
We were aluminum bottle.
Yeah. Most of the time, I never paid.
10 cents. You used to pick up paper and get in free.
Oh,
Same
yeah,
way at the
yeah.
drive-in.
You gotta pick up trash.
Okay, now we want to talk to the police chief, or he wants to talk to us. Wait to hear from you.
He could deputize
Yeah,
us and give us
motion.
a badge. We got those people carrying the booze in to those festivals.
Bobby, your uncle snuck in as much as I did.
Sticks.
Y'all came snuck in all the time.
And I failed to bring my aluminum bottle tonight, so unfortunately. Mayor, council, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come before you this evening. I know Charlie has had some conversations with you, excuse me, concerning the findings our staff has made in regard to issues relating to our efforts towards recruiting, hiring, and retention of police officers. And I appreciate your sharing our concerns and your genuine interest in ensuring we are capable to address these things properly. In review of what affects our recruiting, hiring, and retention most, we found several key factors that seem to contribute to this. Area competition for prospective hirees. That's not only in the law enforcement field, but also in local business and industry. Pay scale, which includes starting wage, mid-level wage, and senior level wages. The change in the state retirement benefits system, as you all know, it's no longer defined benefits. It's now defined contribution, more of a 401k, I guess you would say. Current unemployment percentages that we enjoy here in the area. Incentives, specifically educational incentives. Those are considerations given to those with higher levels of education. Now, of course, the overall portrayal of law enforcement nowadays seems to have taken a bit of a toll on that as well. First of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about compensation. And you'll see in some of the packets, you have, there's a myriad of bits of information in there concerning the different pieces. You'll see a graph in there, I think, and that graph will be illustrate what I'm about to tell you. And that is, these numbers are, first of all, I think you need to understand they're approximate and they're on average. So they're ballpark figures, they're not precise. I want to make that clear. But just to give you an idea, our current rate of entry level pay, when you look at the surrounding agencies and we figure the average of what they're doing, we're about $4,800 below that. We are currently about $5,800 below the surrounding agencies which we compete and what an officer with 1 year of experience would make. Approximately 11,800 below the surrounding agencies of which we compete with. An officer of 5 years experience would make 11,400, 10 years, 8,000 and 15. And when we get up to the 20-year mark, we're about 6,800 under there. So you can see it's kind of balloons in the center there. And if you look at the graph, you'll see there's two parallel lines like uprights on a field goal that really show how that balloons out there. So I think if you consider those, you can see how those figures would have a direct impact on recruitment and retention. Now, just to give you some basic information, currently of our 49 sworn officers, we have but 10 who have between 11 and 20 years of service. Now, that's just 20% of our sworn workforce. Now, of these, 5 have over 15 years of experience or service with the community. Now, this is an important factor because not only as it relates to these salary numbers that we spoke of, but also because these folks are right on the cusp of looking at retirement. So they're still part of the old pension program. So they're right in the position now when those people really start looking forward to those opportunities and start exploring that with some seriousness. So what we need to also consider is how do we keep those people with us? And to do that, we have to suggest there may be a pay that would be significant enough where it would have an impact on that pension and make it worthwhile for them to stay those extra few years. Now, why is that important? Well, one of the main reasons I like to point out is that whole issue of seniority and the age of our department is very important in this way. You know, it's critical when you're considering that we've hired, say, 11 new officers in 2015, and we have openings for more, and we'll be hiring more in the very near future. The vast majority of those who retired, they left right around the 20-year mark. So they're right about, as soon as they reach that retirement age and year, they're looking. Overall, EPD has 72% of its sworn officers with under 11 years of service. 28% are between 11 and 20 years of service, and we have no one over 21 years of service. Furthermore, I think you have to keep in mind that it takes at least a full year for us to get a person hired, trained, and going solo, so they're taking calls. So that process, now you're filling spots, but you're also have a year to where that person becomes totally effective in producing what you need them to do. And we start talking about those numbers, and I think that's what I like you to keep in mind with that is RAND does a number of studies, and I know you're all vitally aware of those. They had one that's called Healthy and Unhealthy Distributions of Officers by Decade of Service. And according to RAND, a relatively healthy organization has a pattern with the following averages. First decade of service, that's 0 to 11 years. That value or percentage should be about 48%. The second decade, that's 11 to 20 years, should have a value of about 36%. And then those of 21 years and up, you should have about 17%. And as mentioned, you can see ours do not reflect that. Again, ours, where you would want the 48%, we are 72. Where you would prefer 36, we're at 28, and where you would prefer 17, we have 0. So being able to hold on to senior employees for as long as we can to get those younger ones up to speed is vitally important as well. Now, obviously, as I mentioned before, unemployment figures are critical in this thought process as well. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the unemployment rate in Elizabethtown, Fort Knox, as we're talking Hardin, Meade, and LaRue counties, through August of 2015 was 4.7%. Our preliminary estimate through September is 4.5%. So that's extraordinarily good, you know. So these levels of competition to obtain, you know, and retain the best employees is high. And in order to compete, we must offer, you know, what's necessary to sway their decisions when they're going to go from one place to the other. Now, another RAND study in 2010 entitled Recruiting and Retaining America's Finest, Evidence-Based Lessons for Police Workforce Planning, they made the following observation. And they found this critical to obtaining quality and quantity when recruiting. And this falls under the heading of why recruits join police departments under the basic model. And this is a quote from their findings. We hypothesize that the number of recruits is a positive function of the wages offered by the police department and a negative function of the wage of non-police alternatives. So in other words, all else equal, the higher police wages are, the more likely a potential recruit will join a police agency. But the higher non-police wages are, the more likely a potential police recruit will take work elsewhere. So what that's telling us is that, again, as I mentioned before, we not only compete with other law enforcement agencies, but we compete with local business. So with that in mind, we have to consider the salaries that we offer have to be somewhere in that ballpark. And according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the real person income per capita of the Elizabethtown, Fort Knox area through 2013, these are the latest figures that are published, was $42,742. Now, another economic measure that they refer to often is also called, and this one's called the average metropolitan statistical area compensation, which through 2014 was $56,216. Now, that number differs because that averages just those people in the workforce, not the per person per capita number as the other does. So there's the difference. So these numbers can challenge us as well when we're talking about competing, especially when we limit it to local residents. Education and college incentives is another issue when we talk about attracting folks. Because obviously, I think we want the very best that we can possibly draw. As an anecdotal follow-up to that, I recently had a conversation with Mr. Larry Kelly, who is the program director of the Criminal Justice Program at ECTC. And in a conversation, he told me, this has been about 2 months ago, of at least two graduates that he had a phone conversation with. Now, apparently what he does is he tracks these graduates. They come, they get their degree in the criminal justice program, they graduate, and then he likes to see what they do afterwards. Well, these two in particular had obtained employment, and they were working locally. I think it was from the local industry, but it was not law enforcement. And he was obviously congratulating them on getting nice jobs and doing well, but asked them, since you have this degree, are you considering trying to pursue some type of further work in law enforcement? And the reply was not for the pay. They simply didn't feel like it was worth that. And that gets into what is that education worth? What's the value? And I would not argue that that person necessarily is going to, by all intents and purposes, be a better pick over the other, but it does give you some statistically measurable differences that are worthwhile looking at. And if a person invests that much time and money into that education, they're going to look for the payoff, obviously, in that. So it's not uncommon for agencies to offer some type of incentive as it relates to that, not only as entry level, but also as they gain experience within the workforce as well. And it just to give you an example of that, Shepherdsville Police Department, which is one of our neighbors here, provides the following. Between 10 and 49 hours of higher education, they give 24 cents on the hour more. 50 to 89 goes up 48, 90 plus 72. And if you have a bachelor's, it's up to 96 cents on the hour more. Now, it's also important, I think, to note that not everyone does this. Okay, you know, some have chosen to do this, some have chosen not to. However, I think when you're considering the value of attracting those with higher education, the cost is often offset by that value. And I'm going to give you some examples. In another conversation I had with Larry Kelly of ECTC, he supplied me with some documentation from some research that he was aware of that found some very positive impact that education can have on your workforce, specifically relating to policing. For instance, attitudes, performance indicators, and use of force. So they found that those folks seem to be more open-minded, less authoritarian, more understanding of human behavior, more sensitive to community relations, typically fewer disciplinary actions, receive fewer injuries on a job, better handling difficult situations, including mentally ill, and so on. So there were several things that clearly indicate that this may be worth paying that little extra to attract. That leads us to the next piece, which is residency. Of all the surrounding agencies of whom we compete for employees, we're the only one that requires their employees to live in their county. This has created significant difficulties, quite honestly, in gaining not only gross numbers, but also the diversity we're looking for and increased numbers of those quality applicants. And again, you know, we compete not only with surrounding law enforcement, but also with local industry in that vein. So if you think about these issues that we've discussed, you're talking about pay, attracting numbers of applicants, attracting a more diversified pool of applicants, increased opportunities for quantity and quality, and lowering the risk to those that want to take the opportunity to possibly move here, but want to make sure that job works out first. We have to look at residency, and it does impact these issues dramatically. To give you a point specific to this, we've had prospective applicants tell us this over the phone where they've told us, well, you know, I've got a mortgage, you know, my spouse has a good job, I got kids at school right now, love to take the opportunity, hear good things about the place, but that's a big risk for me right now to take. They all want to take the job and hope it works out well, but for the chance of maybe them not cutting mustard, so to speak, and not making it to the program, it's a huge risk for them to take. And when they don't have to take that risk and go to one of these neighboring agencies, they'll make that choice every time. And that's typically what we're finding. Also, this is a big issue when it comes to laterals. I told you before, we're a young department, we're getting younger. And so when we can create an environment that allows opportunities for people with experience, that have the qualities, the training and education experiences that we want to apply to us, that is a benefit, because now we can look seriously at folks that have a little more seasoning and can add to being a little more of a balance into those numbers that we talked about earlier. So I think by relaxing that person, they can accept that job a year or so down the road. I think once they found the job's working out, they're going to look much more seriously at moving closer. I can tell you that I think that from my own personal experience, I can see that after a short period of time, people see the value of living in this area, and they would come. So basically, I just kind of to sum up, finish up, we understand that there's a lot more detailed discussion necessary to this to get the greater aspects of these issues. But however, I think as suggested by Charlie, okay, we would agree that addressing the starting pay and the residency now would be of greatest urgency. And we'll be preparing, because we need to prepare to test soon, and we wish to do that as soon as, I guess, we hear back from you and your decisions on this process. So please keep in mind that, it's our aim not to just be competitive, but to attract, the brightest, the most diversified employment pool that has the character and the values that people with our community deserves. And we believe competitive pay, amending the residency rule, those two things in particular will begin to allow this to happen. Any particular questions at this point?
Tracy,
Yes, sir.
you said that we are a relatively young police department.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask you, do you know roughly what the average age of our police force?
I don't know, because we just, like I said, within that period of time, you figure since August of 2015, we've hired what, 12 people? I'm struggling to even know their names at the stage of the game anymore. It's a terrible thing to say, but I don't. But that's a good point. And when I say age, it's not only chronological age, but it's usually age and experience in that service. And that is even more critical than their personal age.
And to me, if we're that would be, a good sign if we are a young, at least if everything else works out in terms of keeping your officers and things.
Yes, sir.
So when they reach the 20-year level, and I know we've had a lot of retirements, are they leaving because there are better opportunities for them at that time from a pay scale versus staying on with the police department, since we are a 0% compared to the 17 otherwise?
Well, there's no straight clear answer to that, because people leave for various reasons. Now, let's talk about the economic aspect of that. Once in the old, not the current system we have, but the old system that applies to the people we're talking about trying to keep on, then that system, clearly when you get to that point, there's not a lot of incentive for staying on if your pay doesn't change much, because it won't change your income from your retirement much. So that being the case, from an economic standpoint, it makes much more sense for you to leave, draw that pension, and go to work over here, even if it's maybe less money. When you combine the incomes, you're making a tremendous amount more money. But you're still working here, and at some point in time with the second job, I'll stop. So I'm going to have to default back on that pension, or at least that pension plus whatever investments I've made from this second job. So if we can encourage them to stay a few more years, then that'll get us past that little bit of that hump. And for them, when they quit that second job in the future, that second pension will be a little bit beefier for them and serve them and their families much better.
Chief, are you proposing that we change the maximum number as well, or just the front end number?
I think we need to look at all of them. I think that across the board. And I think for now, Charlie, I've talked about this at length. Right now, I think it's critical to talk about that beginning number, whatever adjustments that might bring. And then when we get into the budget period, really start talking about looking at the adjusting all of those numbers. And of course, it's entirely however you as council sees best to approach it. I'm sure everyone would love to have that done sooner than later, but I think that we need to really look at those numbers. What does it mean? Where do we need to be in relation to the other folks, and how do we make that determination to where it's good for E-Town, but it's also going to be seen by somebody that's looking as, you know, it's worth making that trip and coming this direction as well.
You know, I reviewed this and I had a conversation with Tracy this afternoon. I didn't have any problems with anything he proposed except the residency. You know, and as I expressed to him, if you live here and the atmosphere that he's trying to create down there is that they're part of the community and they're out in the community and all that. But he answered it, and he answered it here this afternoon too, is that risk that they're taking up front, and with the mortgages and the spouse on the job and the kids in another school. And so I support your proposal.
Thank you, sir.
I'm afraid that if we up it on the front end, and if we don't up it on the back end, then the incremental increases, I mean, they're low now. If you look between 5 and 10 years. So if you're looking after 5 years of service, and you know after another 5, after 5 more years, your pay is only going to go up $3,700.
Yes, sir.
I mean, then that's when people at that period of time, you know, I've worked here 5 years, or I've worked here 10 years, and now I'm going to look and see where my pay is going to be after 15 years of service.
Sure.
I mean, there has to be something that gives somebody the incentive to hang in for the 20. You know what I'm saying?
You're right.
Because that, quite frankly, from an economic standpoint, that's when kind of the payoff starts to come. It's not on the front,
Yes.
you know, it's after 20 years.
I agree completely. And, you know, and of course, since we don't have that pension to be the hook, and in the past, the pension was the hook.
That's right.
If I get you here and you're here to 5 to 10 years, stick with me, and the payoff is there. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist for anybody anymore.
Right.
And the other thing is too, and this was an interesting thing that came up during one of the leadership classes that I took last year. They talked specifically about the employment pool that we're all getting. Okay, and this doesn't just not just police.
Right.
And how they view employment as opposed to how people from my generation view employment. You know, I think the old saying was, you know, we used to live to work and they work to live. And not that anything's wrong with either one of them, it's just a different way of looking at life. And to your point, is what they're saying is this, is that people, they're looking at the more of what can I do now? What is this giving me now? And what can I get out here now? I'm going to give you an example of that. That's very much to the point and local. I had a conversation with Rick Games, and I thought he did a great job in his presentation last week. And you recall, I think much of that goes what we were talking about tonight. And he said that, because I was asking him, how does this workforce seem, you know, in local industry? I mean, this is what we've talked about. You know, people looking around, they're continually look at that 5-year mark, as you just mentioned, Councilman, and then they start looking around and who's competing? You know, where do I need to go? And he said, they had that very conversation. It was long before the one I had with him before. And there was a company in particular that said they had 2 or 3 employees that literally left and went across the street for 25 cents on the hour. And they told them, they said, well, we have better benefits. And their reply was, that's fine, but we don't need that now. What we need is this. Basically, when I need that, I'll come back to you. And so we've got a workforce that's less inclined to go to work and be there for 25 years like my age was. And so they're more apt to do just what you said. The 5-year mark up to the 10-year mark, I'm going to start looking. If this still proves to do well, then I'm going to stick around. Especially if we create, I think, a working environment that adds to that.
But I agree, there has to be an incentive.
Yes, sir.
To get to the 20. You know,
Yes, sir.
there has to be an incentive to reach the magic number. But then we have to weigh that, because that magic number continues on for many more years. And, you know, with the retirement program, so we just have to kind of weigh that. But I'm just afraid that if we don't raise the back end and we only raise the front end, then the increments each and every year, or if you take them in 5-year segments, you've got to have some incentive.
I agree. I
hang in
I
there.
agree with you wholeheartedly. Yes.
Stick with it.
Raising the maximum is a part of it, but the way that presenting this is making the decision about what level you start on the front end.
Front end.
Because then we can make it part of our budgeting process, looking at the back end and getting that instituted through yearly budget. So maybe it's not an immediate effect all across the board. So that's why we're looking at it that way. But particularly for the police department to be able to institute new starting numbers for recruiting at this point, to decide on what that level is, what that starting rate is, and then through the budget process, work on the numbers for the maximum for the next year, for instance. And then those things get reevaluated each year.
What do we have to do to set this in motion, I guess, for them to go ahead and start the recruiting?
I think you need to decide at what level, what the number is, and then just, I think you can do it by motion.
Is your proposal enough, do you think? Is that enough to
I think,
start?
I think a 37.5 is a fair starting amount, yes.
Jamie, I can make Tracy look away. as you answer.
And no.
He's over there doing this.
Here's the thing, I mean,
Now would they say, please, no, don't do that if you want to do more?
I mean, all of us, and you know, I talked to you about this too.
Yes, sir.
We don't want to be looking at other places where we compete and we don't want to be looking at somebody else's standard and trying to reach that standard. We want to be the standard there. We want to set the standard that everybody else looks to try to achieve.
I agree.
And we want to do that with police department, fire department, all of our first responders and things like that. So, you know, I support you as well.
Well, and I think when we talked about it this last budget session, we were all in agreement that, that we were in favor, you know, at that time. We just needed some more concrete information. And I think we wanted a bottom line, you know, what was
What's
your
the magic
feel?
number?
Right,
Yeah.
what's the number?
To get started on.
So, right, I think we're in agreement on that.
Let me ask you this, and if we want to be the standard, and, I'd be in favor of making that starting number 38. That's $500 more than he's asked for, but that's 38,000. That would put us above the others in starting.
Oh, I see.
It takes a year to get, I mean, it takes a year to get them
Trained.
trained.
Yeah. Chief, how many do
Chief
you
Malone,
lose in
we're
that
aware of
first
the
year?
situation with fire department too, so I don't want you feeling down.
How many in that first year get started with their training and bail on you?
Well, luckily not many, but we have lost some. And I attribute the minimum number of loss to that, to the process, the screening process to get people in, because, you know, as you're fully aware, it's a pretty arduous system, and it really does. We spent a lot of time, a lot of money and effort to screening these folks to ensure that they have the basic qualifications and character that we need in this police department. So I will tell you this, that typically the Department of Criminal Justice Training is pretty happy to see the people we send to them. Where we have some of the issues as relates to this recruiting is that we have found that from year to year to year, we'll have fluctuation obviously in the numbers. I'm talking like gross number of applicants. But we find that the number of new applicants gets smaller, and, you know, the repeat applicants grows a little. So when you're looking at new applicants, that number seems to start shrinking over a period of time, which kind of goes back to why we discussed the residency issue.
So after, if they're on and they're with us for, I don't know what year span we would use, would you then want them to become a resident of the community, or you're still okay with them living?
I'm
wherever?
okay with them living outside. I'm fine with that. I think what most agencies do is if they have a desire to pull them closer in, they usually use some type of incentive to do that. And there's a number of things we can sit and talk about as it relates to that that could be very helpful. But right now, as you'll look on that sheet that I think Charlie gave you and I handed out secondarily, there's the other agencies have really just none.
No.
You know,
you live
basically, if you don't show up to
wherever.
work, you're
Uh-huh.
you're in trouble.
You don't take your car home, or do they? Do they
No,
take their
no,
cars home?
and they've got, I think that has that information on there. Most of them will do this. They'll allow you to say, drive the car home if you live in the county. And then only like say to and from work or to and from work related issues. And then if you live in the city, you can drive it off duty because it's obviously you have more cars, and then they're subject to call and things of this nature.
Okay.
Yeah.
We won't be able to, so we're not gonna do anything till next week.
No.
Next Tuesday.
Sounds good, Chief.
Does. Thank you very much. Appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Mark, we on the agenda Tuesday night with this?
Yeah.
Hey, we need to raise them, swimming pool rates a little bit.
Ding dong.
Get back up here, Seth.
There you go.
That private party's gonna be high. There you go.
How about we go in a free lazy river pass?
Yeah. With every new hire.
Last month was free all the
That's
time.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tony had minor surgery, he's doing fine, but we want to congratulate Sarah, another son this morning. 8 pounds, 3 ounces.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
At least 12. Sarah feels better.
And you know, we don't meet next Monday, we meet on Tuesday. That's to give you guys a 3-day weekend to celebrate Valentine's Day. All right?
So it means you're off work Monday?
Sure, they need. Sure.
Tomorrow's Fat Tuesday, you know, tomorrow's Fat Tuesday.
Hey, I thought, we had an air board meeting today, and I just want to thank Don. They were thrilled with the snow removal. Thank you very much. They are so happy. Y'all did a heck of a job. They had, Campbellsville was closed. They had planes that land here from Campbellsville that couldn't land over there. Fort Knox was shut down. They landed here. So it was a big day.
We're always open.
Yeah,
Always open.
great job.
Ready?
Let's go on.
Ready?
No, they didn't undo my street.
Didn't get mine on Marty Street, but you got everybody else.
That's right, Don.
That's right.
Don lived
Hey,
fast.
go on, get out of here.
You feel
Yeah.
good.
Unless I'm in New Orleans, and maybe I'll.
Oh, they were thrilled though. They did. They said Campbellsville was shut down.